everyone has to recognize that, I keep telling people, it wasn't the test that kept people safe in the bubble, because we're testing daily now, just as we did in the bubble. What kept everyone safe were the quarantines that were required before you went into the bubble, and then all of the requirements once you were there. Playing outside of a bubble, this, presents a host of different issues. And we're unfortunately, just going to have to learn as we go here.
I can't even imagine how many times your phone rang yesterday. Do you have a count there for us? I mean, it must have been pretty crazy leading up to that moment of saying, okay, let's postpone.
Yeah, I'd always say, no count, but in addition, obviously, I have a fantastic group of colleagues who are working through these issues with me, in many cases literally around the clock, because of when test results are coming in, because follow-up on situations, dealing with team personnel, their doctors, our doctors. And so again, I think it was, for all of us, a wake-up call. Not that we didn't know it, but it's especially until we're at a point where there's vaccinations available to people in our community, and that's probably a ways off. Every day is going to be presenting new issues.
I want to switch gears a little bit, because you were asked earlier this week about the possibility of expansion, and for the first time in years, you didn't shut the door on it. Adam, the glee you caused in Seattle with those comments. I will ask you, how likely would you say expansion is in the near future?
Well, what I said, honestly, was not all that different than what I've said in the past. What I said is it's inevitable that we'll expand at some point. And when asked about Seattle specifically, Rachel, I, of course, was in the league when the Sonics were in town. We didn't make a secret out of the fact that we hated to leave Seattle, but at the time we left, it was clear that Key Arena, the then Key Arena, was not at NBA specifications, and there were no plans on the table to build a new arena in Seattle. And that was 12 years ago or so. Now we're at the point where there is a new arena, in essence, a rebuilt Key Arena that's come online, NHL team going into Seattle. So you now have the state-of-the-art arena that didn't exist back then. And I'd say in terms of expansion, it's been a long time since the league expanded. It's not on the front burner. I mean, we're not about to expand at this moment, as you can imagine, just as to your earlier that are occupying us around the clock. Expansion is not on the top of the list, but we'll turn back to it at some point. And I've said, we loved when we were in Seattle. We've had incredible fans there, incredible, I think, 40-year history of having a team in that market. And there's no doubt there's enormous support there. So at the right time, I think the team owners will turn back to that issue.
So Adam, you got to help me out here. If I'm going to place a bet in Vegas on whether there's going to be an expansion team in the next 5 years of the NBA, how good should I feel about that bet?
I can't even believe you're talking about wagering on this show, Rachel. That's all I'm going to say.
Never, not in this establishment. All right, the All-Star Game gained a lot of momentum last season in Chicago due to some of the great rule changes, right? That Elam ending was so fun. Playing a game this year seems extremely complicated given all the COVID protocols. You've officially given up the hotel rooms and arena reservations in Indianapolis. So what is the plan for All-Star this year?
There is no plan at the moment. I mean, again, because we knew coming into the season we were going to be learning a lot. As you know, because we knew there might be some disruptions in the season, we split the schedule in two halves, which is something we've never done in our history before. So we have a schedule through early March when the natural break would come in our season, not the All-Star break that had previously been planned earlier in February. So as you said, we gave up those hotels and those dates in Indianapolis. So now we still have an opening potentially to play a game. We'd absolutely still love to play that game. I know the players would as well. Our plan is to still go forward and select All-Stars. I think that's very important. And we'll see. Again, one thing I've learned throughout this pandemic is it's virtually impossible to predict even a month ahead. As you know, before we went into Orlando for the bubble, we had the lowest case rate in Florida, then we had one of the highest when we got there. Now we're dealing with what seems like a new surge in cases, and that was not something we obviously knew at the point we planned to restart this week. And I think, fingers crossed on the vaccine, that is, as the vaccine gets rolled out and we start to see, societal adoption of the vaccine and the ability to bring more fans into buildings, presumably at the point that it's appropriate for players and coaching staffs to get vaccinated, that'll happen as well. And so it may open up possibilities by March that I can't even contemplate right now. So we're going to turn back to that, but right now we're just holding the dates.
So, Adam, earlier this week, you said it was your expectation that players would stand for the national anthem. What has changed since the bubble in that regard? And how will the league react if a player still does choose to kneel?
What's changed since the bubble, of course, in Orlando, in a unified fashion, players, coaches, referees chose to take a knee for the national anthem. And throughout the preseason, we had one game in which players kneeled during the preseason. So far in the regular season, all the players have stood. And it's my expectation that players will stand for the national anthem. I mean, it's been part of the tradition of this league since the early 1980s. I recognize that there are appropriate times for protest, which is why the league, in essence, stood down this summer. On the other hand, number one, it's awkward to be put in a position to force people to stand for the national anthem. Obviously, that's a failure to start with, if that's ultimately where we are. But number two, I'd say I think it's an important tradition as part of this country. We've come through a very difficult period where the country feels very divided. Obviously, those tensions haven't gone away. So there's very few things that collective moments where we all can feel we're unified. And I think the national anthem is one of those moments. So it's my hope that our players will continue to choose, and that this tradition will remain part of the league. But again, this is something that we've discussed with the Players Association. It's become part of our collective bargaining agreement right now. And so if there were ever going to be changes, it would be something we'd need to discuss together. But at least for me, especially as we go into these holidays, I will say that it moves me to see people standing in unison for the anthem. There's these very few moments in our lives when people can come together, and it's my hope that our national anthem will continue to be one of those moments.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.